Azoth by Zeitgeistic. Chapter 9, Part 2.
"At last," declared Harry. "But Merlin, did I have a good time?"
Harry groaned. God, was it too much to ask not to have to listen to Boot being so annoyingly chipper on an otherwise pleasant Sunday evening? He lifted his eyes to the ceiling.
"Please, Merlin, if there was a Merlin, don't let Malfoy win the fucking league." "Hey, it's all right, Harry,"
said Terry. Vic had just begun announcing the final standing. Of 20, Boot came in 12th, and his sister Therese 11th. He elbowed Harry in the ribs, and while it didn't hurt, Harry pretended it did just the same.
"If Malfoy wins, he can take us down to Diagon for some celebratory dinner, eh? 2,000 galleons is definitely enough for 3 steak dinners, am I right?"
Malfoy's eyes narrowed. His lips tilted up in a smirk, flicking from Harry's ribs up to his face in a look that clearly said he'd known Harry was faking, and he thought he was acting like a first year. Harry felt exposed, and wished Draco would stop looking at him too. They were settling back into their previous friendship, and most days it was great, phenomenal. It was just that other days it was more than Harry felt any man should have to endure.
"I don't buy steak dinners for people who come in past 10th place."
Boot shrugged good-naturedly. His eyes creased when he smiled, and with his newly Mexico-tanned face he looked rather rakish in an overly happy sort of way.
"Ah, well, I suppose it's just you and Harry then. Say, Harry, if you go to that new place, what's it called, Incendio, then bring me back one of those little creme brulees. They do 'em right up proper. They've got flames on the top to keep it warm and crispy until you're ready to eat them."
Harry smirked at Draco.
"Now, it's not sounding so bad if I come in second. I like little creme brulees."
4th place, Gina White Quadrant.
Vic called to cheer and less savory responses.
"Please,"
Draco replied.
"As if I'd be seen in public with you."
Given the fact that they were already in public together, Harry reckoned the odds weren't as bad as all that. In fact,
2nd place.
All 3 of them held their breath. It was only Harry and Draco left. Harry crossed his fingers, crunched his eyes closed, and belatedly took up a religion. Because even if 2nd place meant extorting Draco into dinner, it also meant Harry would come in 2nd place. To Malfoy.
"Harry Potter."
"Fuck!" Harry said, at the same time that Draco leapt up from the table and made some sort of half-yip, half-whoop sound that wouldn't have been out of place at a cannons match, but definitely would have at Malfoy Manor. Terry clapped him on the back.
"Bad luck, mate. Now you've got to have free dinner with Malfoy. Could be worse, could play for the cannons. Then you'd have to wear orange all the time."
Well, there was one thing he liked about Terry at least. Any wizard who was morally offended by the cannon's colours was all right in Harry's book. He smirked at Terry.
"Could be worse. Could be a reserve player for the cannons."
Boot guffawed, slapping the table a bit as he struggled to breathe. Between laughs, he somehow managed to get out,
Could be worse. Could have been cut first round for Gammon's pre-season draft."
It was at this point that Draco returned with his winnings and his smirk. He eyed him for a moment, taking in Terry's red face and choking gasps, and Harry's more restrained but still ridiculous, delighted laughing.
"Could be worse, I suppose,"
he said, seemingly to himself.
"I could be friends with Weasley."
"Hey," Harry said, because, aura or not, Ron was still his mate. Mostly. This only served to set Boot off on another round of laughter, as Ron's questionable judgment in regards to Quidditch teams was well documented throughout Hogwarts.
"All right, Potter,"
Draco said, still eyeing Boot warily.
"Let's see if that hideous scar of yours can get us a table at Incendio."
It happened that it could get them a table. In fact, it could get them a table on the patio beneath the fairy lights and near the fire pit. Harry supposed he could like Terry a bit after this. After all, he'd somehow managed to convince Draco to take him on a date. Sort of. Even if Draco didn't know it was a date. And it wasn't, in actuality, a date. Harry wasn't complaining, especially now that he'd seen what Malfoy looked like beneath fairy lights. Amazing, basically. "Good evening," said the waiter when he arrived. Harry grinned at him. "Law?" Malfoy rolled his eyes and tried to hide his face behind the menu as he spoke, as if Harry were somehow as happy as Terry and therefore embarrassing to be seen with. "We'll each have the steak. Rare. My friend will have the salad because he's always worried about staying fit for the magazine covers. I'll have the salad because I appreciate the importance of balanced nutrition. House ales? None of those shit imports. Thank you. Please leave." "I love it when you're a twat," Harry said. He leaned back in his chair and felt the heat from the fire pit warm his back. Draco raised one eyebrow. "Really? Yeah, it's very you. You're all happy for a while, and it was so Terry boot that it was nauseating." "You prefer my misery?" Draco surmised. Harry pretended to consider. "That's about the sum of it." The writer returned with their drinks, but it didn't acknowledge him, staring at each other and people walking by. Draco toyed with his beer glass, picked at some bread in a very posh manner. "Do you ever use your animagus form?" he asked. Harry shook his head, swallowing. The truth was, he'd not wanted to do anything at all that reminded him of Draco while they were apart. It was enough to see him at Quidditch League on Sundays. "Nah." "Why?" Draco was aghast. How anyone could not want to be an animagus, Harry could almost hear him thinking. "I got mine, finally." "I know." Harry shrugged. Their food arrived, and he busied himself cutting his steak and eating some. Draco did not look as though he let himself be distracted, as was in line with Harry's luck. "Just didn't want to bother. Queen Elizabeth would probably think I was a quail and shoot me." Draco furrowed his brow. "What? Harry, there is no monarchy in Britain. Why do you keep talking about it as if there were? Have you been hexed?" "You call me Harry again." There was no point in opening up Muggle society for discussion with Draco. No point. Draco waved him off, and the look on his face said that this was about to turn into the worst non-date ever. Harry leaned back, trying to put as much space between them as he could stomach. He was fairly certain that Draco was going to try to talk about before. "Look, I know that I'm not what you want me to be." "Not true," Harry said before he could stop himself. "I like you as you are. You're my—" He hesitated. "You're like my best mate next to Hermione." This stopped Draco right in his tracks. "What about Weasley?" Harry shrugged. "He is an aura now." As if that meant anything. Draco shook his head, uncomprehending. "And?" Harry shrugged again. Honestly, he really wasn't sure. That was something he was going to have to think about, maybe, but now Draco was rolling his eyes and waving his hands like Harry's wacko thought processes were too much for him to suffer. "I don't want a relationship, Harry. I don't have the energy to care that much about another person anymore." Harry pressed his lips together and stared down at his plate. Why couldn't Draco just keep his bloody mouth shut? Harry was doing as Millicent said. He was not looking, and things were better, and Harry was basically happy. Mostly, the sort of happy that consisted of the happiness of being around someone minus the happiness one could gain if they were yours. It came out to 0 in the end, but it was better than miserable, which he had been after Draco refused him. It had taken Harry all summer to force that needy feeling aside and learn to live again. The free steak dinner wasn't looking so appetizing any longer. "Then you're seeing other people?" he guessed. He had Draco huff, then his fork and knife actually clinked against the plate as he set them down. "No, Potter, I'm not seeing other people." "Then why are you bringing this up? I haven't asked you for anything." "Because I don't want you to think that this is going anywhere." "I don't," Harry hissed. He flung up a muffling charm around their table, and Draco's eyes narrowed in response. So what if Harry could only do wondrous magic around him? Draco didn't have to know that. Are you going to let me live it down? I couldn't bloody well help how I felt. Be a mate and just fucking forget, Draco. I can't, Draco bit out. Harry rolled his eyes, pushed his plate away. He was no longer hungry, free or not. Why? Because I don't want you, you twit. The waiter approached warily, circling around a privacy spell and trying to gauge their facial expressions. But Draco's water glass was empty and apparently desperately needed to be filled. The waiter broached the edge, hesitantly refilled Draco's glass, and hurried out again. When he was gone, Harry felt bitterness sink in again. You seemed to want something pretty badly in April. So did you, Draco replied. Harry rolled his eyes. Obviously, I'm bisexual, you're fit. We were friends at the time, why wouldn't I be interested? And then you continued to want it. Draco continued, eyes narrowed to slits. Harry waved his hand. See above? He drank his beer to give his mouth something else to do beside talk, but when he set the glass down again, it seemed that it still wanted to have a go. Look, Draco, he said. It was a one-off for you, I get it. It's shitty for me, but I get it. I won't spend the rest of my life pinning after you, if that's what you're worried about. There, his mind contributed. Well, you can't blame me for being attracted to you. You were attracted to me too, once. So, if it was just sex, Draco said, then you'd be happy? No. Harry clenched his fists beneath the table. You're my friend, you git. We go back to that, and of course I'm going to fall for you again. That's what love is, stupid. Friends plus sex plus love. Actually, now that he thought about it, the sex part wasn't needed, but he'd be damned if he was going to take it back now. Draco would latch onto it, and they wouldn't even be able to be friends anymore for his stupid fear that Harry loved him. You can't define something by using the defined word in the definition. Oh, shut the fuck up, Malfoy, Harry said softly. He smiled to show he didn't mean it, and that he desperately wanted this conversation to be over. Look, just don't worry about this. Let's go back and do something productive with the rest of the night. I found a manuscript on early alchemy that I think you'll be interested in. It suppositions that transfiguration was the final step in creating a stone. Draco nodded, but didn't look happy about it. Harry signalled for the waiter, and when he came, said, Could you pack us up 2 creme brulees and add a third one to Terence Boot at the Leaky Cauldron? All on this twat's bill, please, Harry added, tipping his head towards Malfoy. Draco huffed an annoyance, but nodded when the waiter looked to him for confirmation. I suppose friends buy one another creme brulees, he said levelly. Harry smirked. I named my cat after you, Harry said, stirring his polyjuice. It still had a month to brew, and then Snape was going to have Miguela put animal hairs into, and her own hair in a third. Harry would have to figure out which 2 were bad, take the one with Miguelas, and report on what happened to the body when one changed genders via patient versus via human transfiguration. He was not looking forward to it. Well, she's an easel, really. A squib. No words. There was a heavy pause. You named a female squib nasal after me? Snape said to clarify. Harry nodded, too busy trying to keep count to respond with words. Why? Harry let him simmer. Ha! Patience joke, he thought, while he got his polyjuice to a stopping point. He covered the cauldron and set his steering wheel aside. Snape was aghast. The artist had not been confident with such an expression. Only if you plan to use her for ingredients, Snape hissed. His threatening demeanour was greatly impaired by the pastel landscape. Harry shrugged. Nah, I think I'll keep her. They were silent for a while, as Harry set to work on his essay for understanding the qualities of common antidotes. He could hear Snape shuffling around in his frame, where he'd set up a makeshift office amid the heather. Finally, he could take it no more and said,
"You and Mr. Malfoy are friends?"
Snape decided, hopefully. Harry shrugged.
"Yep."
"Except for the part where I'm almost to the point of drawing our names inside hearts like Ginny used to do." He checked his potion and returned to his essay. Snape didn't seem inclined to continue his line of questioning, which was all right with Harry. The door opened and Draco stuck his head in. His eyes slid to Snape and back to Harry.
"You're late, Potter. You were supposed to meet me 20 minutes ago."
"Hardly unusual,"
Snape said.
"Boggart."
Harry scooped up his paper and placed a series of alarms on his polyjuice potion to warn him if it needed attention.
"Please be dismissed,"
Snape said, sarcasm dripping from his voice like oil paint.
"I shan't keep you from your no doubt very important friend activities."
"Hi, Uncle Seth,"
Draco said, unperturbed.
"Draco,"
Snape greeted.
"I understand you chose my name for Potter's deficient nasal." "She isn't deficient,"
Harry said. He stuffed his inkwell in his bag angrily and then had to get it back out again to check the cap. Didn't need another essay ruined by a lake of green ink.
"We're going to make a philosopher's stone for our inter-subject project,"
Draco continued. He was staring at his nails, the very picture of nonchalance.
"What do you think?"
"That you are wasting your time,"
Snape replied, just as bored.
"Potter, do remember to have that essay to me by tomorrow night. That is, if you plan on passing your first term."
Harry huffed.
"Yes, Professor."
He slung his bag over his shoulder and followed Draco out of the lab and back to his rooms, the corridor over. Draco opened the door before Harry arrived and held it open for him.
"I don't remember giving you the password,"
Harry said, eyes narrowed as he stepped through the portrait hole.
"I don't remember you giving it to me either,"
Draco said. They dumped their bags on a table in the sitting room, and Harry summoned a stack of books from his bedside table. He heard Severia yelp, and when the books floated over to him, she was atop the Alcahest and the Azoth, claws sunk desperately into the pages to keep hold.
"Sorry, Savsy,"
Harry murmured to her, and she was fine again, rolling about on the floor and offering her tummy for inspection.
"There's my girl."
He caught Draco raise his eyebrows and grinned.
"Severia's such a long name."
"Don't let my godfather hear you butchering his name like that. He'll never get mastery if he doesn't sign off on it."
Harry snorted.
"Do I look that stupid to you?"
Was all Draco said.
"I was thinking we should start with trying to define a philosopher's stone exactly and work backward from there to make our hypothesis on how one's made."
It had worked for learning potions after all.
"Immortality,"
Draco said.
"and transformation of base metals into precious ones."
He chewed on his bottom lip with his erotically crooked canine teeth.
"There's such wildly different effects that I can't think of anything that would be able to do both of them."
"Not that different,"
Harry said, scrunching his nose.
"Just opposite. One part creates value, another destroys it. The link is already there."
"Pardon? Eternal life, Potter. It's hardly destructive."
"Isn't it? How can anyone find value in life if there's no end to it? There's no motivation to do anything, no sense of urgency or need or meaning at all. Just an endless, boring chore."
Well, that certainly seemed to put a damper on Draco's spirits. He was silent for a long time, eyes drifting somewhere in the middle distance. Harry used the time to outline his essay for Snape and make a list of topics he needed to cross-reference.
"I think you're wrong,"
Draco finally said.
"Maybe you just haven't got a reason to live forever."
"Obviously."
He died already, and it wasn't so bad. Just boring. Not like life would be if it never ended, he supposed. Same old train station, same old emptiness. He thought of the lost spirits in the woods that his crow self watched, and hoped to Merlin that he was never like that, eternal and stuck, unable to change.
"That's what connects them," Draco decided. "Not opposite forces of creation and destruction, A need for life and wealth, or maybe just a belief that one needs it for something particular. Alchemy has always relied on a spiritual connection to the divine.
Maybe. Harry allowed. Same difference in any case. He started thinking about potions that worked with need. Felix Felicis, for one. Nutritive potions, maybe. Those shared a few common ingredients, both used as distilled water base. Purity, perhaps, could link them in some way. And then there was...
Potter!
Draco kicked his shin a bit. Harry scowled.
You had a look on your face I haven't seen since summer holidays after third year.
What happened then? Harry asked, but he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer.
Uncle Seth invented a healing potion.
So? Draco smirked.
It was a healing potion that healed everything he tried it on.
Harry stared at him. Panacea. He'd forgotten all about that aspect of the Philosopher's Stone. Had Snape been trying for the great work as well? And how did universal healing tie in with endless life and wealth?
Doubtful,
Draco said with some disappointment.
But he had that look on his face when he was working on it like you do now. That cataloging look.
That's what I was doing. Draco grinned, all sexy teeth and crinkly eyes. Harry died, perhaps, then struggled to maintain his best we're just mates and I only love you like a bro face.
I know, Morin. This time last year you didn't give a toss about potion. It's
brilliant, Harry suggested, still undone by Draco's smile. Cool, great, sexy. He added the last one because he'd finally perfected Snape's swirly rope maneuver, and one of these days Draco was bound to notice. Luna had, though perhaps Luna noticing wasn't necessarily reflective of its obviousness.
Weird,
Draco decided. Harry scowled.
But still useful. It means I have to do less work for our inter-subject project and I can focus on my capstone.
God, you cock, Harry said, but with only a little rancor. You're using me. Draco smiled.
Obviously.
He'd inflected his voice like Snape's to mock Harry and how he unconsciously picked up that trait since last spring. He went straight to Harry's trousers. It was really the last thing he needed. But he tossed a quill at Draco and laughed and put his leg up on the chair like he was getting cozy, and no one had to know. In November, the door to Harry's room opened quiet, without his permission, and he turned from his reclined reading position on the rug to find Millicent Bulstrode holding a very irate-looking dark lady who, if Harry was not mistaken, had died the previous September.
How do you Slytherins keep getting my password?
He wondered and thanked Merlin that he'd at least left his trousers on. It was after the students' curfew, after all, and he couldn't be expected to be decent at all times in his own room when there was a Merlin fucking password on his door. Should probably summon a shirt, but couldn't be asked.
Blame Granger,
said Millicent. He deposited the mutinous-looking cat on Harry's settee and gave it a pointed stare.
I used her research to get in.
The cat hissed angrily, and Harry quite suddenly realized that Hermione was on his couch. And she wasn't pleased about it. He turned to Millicent.
Is that?
Yes. Harry nodded slowly, attempted to take this in.
Wait, what research?
She was looking into how arithmancy could be used to affect animation of Renaissance portraits, specifically those holding passwords. You've got a Botticelli on your door. Granger wasn't talking. And here the cat gave a very vocal and unequivocal hiss. So I disabled the password with her hypothesis equations. A Botticelli, eh? He thought it was just a handsome bloke who liked to wink at him when he said his password.
Calm down, said Harry. At least you know your hypothesis is correct.
He reached out to pat her on the head, but drew his hand back quickly when she began a low, ominous growl. Of course the sound drew the attention of his Kneazle. Severia trotted in from the bedroom, blinking wide, sleepy eyes, and mewling curiously in Harry's direction. He tipped his head towards the cat on the couch, saying,
I wouldn't if I were you. She's not in the best place right now.
Typically, he was ignored. Severia hopped onto the couch and immediately set about sniffing and pawing curiously at Hermione. Hermione glowered at Harry from her perch, tail swishing as angrily as Crookshanks ever had around Scabbers. Her eyes never left Harry's, the dour look promising murder if he didn't end this indignity straight away. "Is she stuck?" asked Harry. Millicent had taken it up on herself to sit in the armchair and help herself to the tea service recently delivered from the kitchens. "Seems that way. I came back from dinner and she was on my bed like this. It's not unusual to find her on my bed." Hermione hissed warningly and was ignored. "But it's unusual to find her there with fur. And it's been an hour. Even Hermione doesn't spend so long in research mode without taking a break." "How did we get her out?" Millicent added milk to her tea and twirled the spoon around without clicking the porcelain. Where did Slytherins come up with these posh types? You never even think it to look at her. Harry supposed it didn't matter what kind of trousers Millicent wore. She'd never be able to hide how she crossed her ankles, just like Ron would never be able to hide that he was a milk-in-fur sort of bloke. Harry solved it by being a tea-in-only sort of bloke. "Beats me," Millicent said. She sipped her tea while Dark Lady Hermione glowered. "I've never bothered to learn the animagus transformation. You and Draco are the resident experts on that, but he isn't in his room." Harry eyed Hermione warily. "What about McGonagall?" There was an abrupt and violent uproar from Hermione Dark Lady, and Harry hastily scooted back on the rug, putting as much distance between himself and her claws as possible. "Fine, no, McGonagall, for fuck's sake, Hermione, you don't have to attack me." Hermione only growled. Harry rolled his eyes. Millicent was enjoying his tea, and he was cowering in a corner. "Hermione, can I?" He gestured vaguely, trying to impart, "Hold you," without actually saying or gesturing, "Hold you." She merely stared at him, so he approached, and when her claws remained retracted, he carefully picked her up, sliding a hand beneath her ribs to feel her pulse. It was hammering. "Okay, first you need to calm the fuck down. How are you not exploding? I know you're scared." Here she called again, but it sounded rather plaintive and terrified to him. "Well, you have to calm down. Take a deep breath if you can. I don't know how cats work." Fuck, she was having a panic attack. This was so exactly like Hermione while being nothing at all like Hermione. He wasn't calming down at all. Feeling exceptionally uncomfortable, Harry started patting her back. His fingers got lost in the fur. Even as a cat, Hermione had an excess of hair. Severia butted up against his thigh, then popped herself up on his lap and curled up next to Hermione, purring. "Savsy, don't be a nuisance," Harry murmured. She blinked slowly at him and then returned to cuddling Hermione. Just when Harry thought he was finally getting Hermione's pulse to slow down, the door snapped open again. "Harry, I know I wanted to try transfiguring the Felix Fleeces into bad luck, but I think I should wait because— Oh, hello, Mel." Draco stopped as he came around the couch and catalogued the scene with efficiency. His eyes lingered briefly on Harry's bare chest. "Draco," said Millicent. She sipped her tea. "Popping round for tea?" He finally took in Harry's situation, that of a man with 2 cats on his lap. He smirked. "Don't tell me you've talked Potter into getting another Squibby Neezer, although that one looks a lot like— Fuck, don't say it!" Harry yelped. He reached down and dug Hermione's claws out of his thigh. "Shit, retract!" "She's stuck," Millicent offered, "and rather choleric." Draco took the spare chair and poured himself the last of Harry's tea. Bugger! He hadn't got to drink a single cup of that. Now the tea-in-fur sort of bloke, although Harry'd known that in first year. Weird. "How'd you get stuck?" asked Draco, as if Hermione were capable of creating English vowels and consonant at present. "Well, I think she panicked," Harry said. He resumed patting. "Come on, Hermione, you won't be stuck like this forever. Stop panicking and start thinking. You have to calm down." Severia began licking her head. Harry wasn't sure it was helping, but he could appreciate wanting to contribute. To his surprise, Draco got up from the chair and came to kneel on the floor in front of Harry. His face would be right in front of Harry's crotch if he just leaned forward, but that was exactly not what he wanted to think about, with Millicent staring beadily at him and Hermione on his lap, claws millimeters from embedding in his upper thigh. Draco leaned into Hermione's line of sight, eyes narrowed, studying. "Granger?" Hermione's ears flicked. Tail swished once, jerkily. "How long have you been like this? Hours?" She flicked her tail 3 times. "Is this the first time you've successfully transformed?" An awkward, cattish nod. "Were you surprised by something after you transformed?" She flicked her ears, flicking Severia off in the process. Malfoy's eyebrows went up. "And did you panic? Forget what it felt like to be human?" She huffed. Draco cocked a grin, lopsided and entirely too much for Harry to endure. "One must certainly appreciate your panergic nature, Granger. You didn't quite beat me to the transformation, but you've certainly beat me for flair. I didn't realize it was even possible to have an existing animal as your form, but where there's a Potter, there's a way, and you do spend rather a lot of time with him." There was a redoubtable meow. Draco retreated to instruct her at a remove, leaving Harry tensed from the threat of fresh claws sinking through his wool trousers. Millicent sipped Harry's tea, and he rather wished he'd put a shirt on at some point prior. "Think about sex," Draco suggested, to raise eyebrows and infuriated tail flicks. He ignored them. "It reminds you of what it feels like to be human." Dale watched her for a moment, but it didn't seem to be doing the trick. He sighed, resumed his seat in the chair next to Millicent. He closed his eyes, tipped his head back, as if life were too exhausting to mess about with. He swallowed, and Harry watched the movement of his throat, hypnotized. He said, "It happened to me. Not the first time, but the second. It was well after curfew, and I was alone in my rooms, with no way to get help for hours. For the first hour, I panicked. For the second, I tried to turn pages in Metamorphosis with pause. When the third hour came, and I still couldn't change back, I decided to wait it out. But I'm not a patient person. I curled up on my bed, but I was too wound up to sleep. When I'm tired and I can't sleep, for whatever reason, I think about sex. It gives me something familiar and relaxing to focus on, like counting werewolves, and if I don't take it too far, I can fall asleep." Harry swallowed, absolute dissolute. Hermione had crawled off his lap and curled up on the cushion next to him, cat eyes bright and big and focused entirely on Draco. Her tail was still for the first time since she arrived. Even Millicent was watching with an uncommon intensity. Draco ignored them all, eyes still closed. "I suppose it's too much for you to have any of your own experience to draw on. Well, neither do I, really, but I can imagine. I'm good at that." He swallowed again, as if guarding himself for a difficult task. Harry felt heated with anticipation. "I like to think that I'm in the dungeons. The view's nice from my suite in the Transfiguration Wing, but there's something erogenous and intimate about the dungeons, and it's familiar to me, so that helps. I think about my prefect dorm with the big window and the yellow-green light that filtered through the lake water and refracted in waves over my head. The way it moved was like bodies, undulating, oscillating, intimate. And I think that someday I'd like to be one of those bodies." He comes in and closes the door softly behind him. It's dark, but for the lake light, and his eyes reflect like water. He stares at me like there are 3 billion other men in the world, but I'm unsurpassed. I've been waiting for him my whole life, I think, but he's never come before now. I would be on my bed, and it would be warm, the light moving all around me. I'm rushed with anticipation. He says my name as he crawls onto the bed, hovers over me. My pulse speeds up, my chest begins to slowly heave. He's finally there, and now I'm alive, still somehow terrified. He trails his fingers from my temple to my jaw, leaving little tracks of magic behind. My eyelids fall shut, and he traces over the slits down my nose. His fingers catch on my bottom lip and tug down. Gasping, I swirl my tongue around the tips, and it's just as arousing as I'd always thought it would be.
He slides his finger down the front of my chest, and the buttons on my shirt slid open in his wake. The fabric falls aside. I'm heated and tensing, untensing, tensing. Undulated like the lake water. Sits up to put his shirt over his head and fling it to the floor, his muscles flexing with the movement. I turn my face into the pillow and bite down, overcome. It's both everything and nothing like I imagined. I respire, badly. My hips flex up and meet his, still straddled over me. I feel as though a single breath would send me over the edge. He groans, and the sound echoes through my room. It's too much for me to bear. I reach up and finally touch him. His skin is hot, his nipples tight and responsive beneath my hands. He lets his head fall backwards, and the pose is so excruciatingly erotic that my fingers clench around his waist and hold him there as I shift my hips up again, move them against him like the water. He begins to move with me. He leans forward, holding himself on his hands, and bends his head to kiss me fiercely. I make a wretched, needy sound and surge up to meet him. I have never been kissed like this before, like he has 1,000 options, but thinks that I am the prize he has to fight for. My hands have moved down to his hips, and I'm struggling to divest him of his trousers without letting him move away from me for even a second. We slide out of our pants, and then it's just skin. Hot, damp, affecting. Our breath humid and fast between us. And too undone to take everything in. My system is overloaded with sensation. The feel of my body overwhelms him, and he can't stay away from my mouth. Can't stop fitting his to mine. And stop kissing me, even if the windows were cracked and all the water came rushing in. He falls to his elbows and slides his fingers into my hair. Our bodies touch all over. His cock is slick with pre-ejaculate, and it slides against mine. I never felt any such thing before, but it's hot and heavy, and I'm trembling from arousal. He shifts his weight, reaches down, takes hold of both of us at once. Oh, I can't stop myself from moaning at the feel of another man touching me, wanting me. He bites his lip. His face is flushed and glistening from the heat. He bends his mouth to my ear and nips the lip. I arch my neck up, aching for more. I can hear his rasping breaths against my neck. He touches me and murmurs, "There is no one but you. There's never been."
Hermione whimpered, and the moment evaporated, leaving Harry entirely undone. Felt raw, exposed. Draco lifted his head, blinking heavily. His face was flushed. The very air weighed as much as Draco. Harry swallowed and glanced around the room, looking for anything to stabilize him. Millicent was staring at Draco with wide, still eyes. Hermione was Hermione. She sat next to Harry on the settee, wrapped up in her dressing gown, not a claw to be found. And she was staring at Draco as if she'd never seen him before.
"Back with us, I see,"
Draco drawled, swallowing heavily. He looked uncomfortable, but didn't bother to hide it when he reached down to rearrange his trousers.
"I told you it would work."
Hermione made another small, unidentifiable sound. Looked as though she might fall off the edge. Harry steadied her waist. He was feeling as though he could make unidentifiable sounds too. It was just that he could so easily see himself saying those things to Malfoy, and would have ever guessed that that was what turned him on.
"I see you, Draco Malfoy,"
Harry thought in resignation. He caught movement from the corner of his eyes and glanced at Millicent to find her giving him a pointed look. He shrugged helpless, sliding his eyes back to Draco. He couldn't look away, because no matter how long he closed his eyes, he couldn't help seeing Draco when he finally opened them again. And Draco was the most dangerous magical creature of all, both boggart and Heart's Desire. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of Azoth by Zeitgeistic. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.